Okay, Morgan, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so we're kind of doing a special today, a little bit. I'm going to start off a segment talking about the Ouija board.
Is your mic okay?
Okay, I'm done touching the mic. You're right. Is it okay? It's okay.
As long as you're okay, I'm good.
All right. So yes, today I'm talking about the Ouija board. So first things first, we're going to dive into the history of the Ouija board. Ooh. But what is a Ouija board?
What is it?
What is it? It's a devilish little thing, no pun intended, that was created as a way to communicate with spirits. It is a flat board marked with all 26 letters of the English alphabet, numbers 0 through 9, and the two words yes and no. Occasionally, some boards have the two extra words hello and goodbye. Actually, most boards do now. Mm-hmm. A small piece of wood or plastic that is heart-shaped comes along with the board, and this piece is called a planchet, I hope. The planchet will act as the main way to communicate and spell out messages with your fingers attached to it. It will be drawn to certain numbers, certain letters, or phrases, and shifted to whichever by an unseen force.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. The Ouija board, originally called a talking board, is kind of hard to pinpoint the origin of it. The idea behind the Ouija board is actually something we have discussed on here before, and it comes from automatic writing. Remember we talked about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Or psychographic. Automatic writing is a psychic ability that allows that person to write words without consciously thinking of what they're writing. It usually looks like pretty chaotic and hectic, and it's understood by spirits taking control of the hand of the medium or communicating through them to write messages in letters.
Ooh.
Usually, automatic writing happens in a trance-like state. Psychographics date back to the Song Dynasty.
Oh my God.
Really long time. This type of spirit writing was later called planchet writing and then called Fujiwara. It was...
Fujiwara?
Fujiwara?
Yeah. What is Fuji though? Oh, it's
it's still an island. Oh, camera. Fuji camera.
Fiji is the island. Fiji is the water.
Fuji.
Then Fuji and who? Huh?
Fuji
yeah, it's
camera.
a camera. It's a camera.
It's a camera. Anyway, so planchet writing was a huge tradition in Chinese culture for mediums to receive various messages from spirits using automatic writing. Eventually, they switched to planchet writing where they would use some type of tray that would guide like a stick, and it would write in either sand or incense ashes, revealing messages from the spirits they were communicating with.
I want to try.
It was like a huge tray too. Like it was like almost like a table.
Yeah, I think I've seen it in a movie before.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. The use of this planchet writing began to give, quote, a black magic vibes and was ultimately put to a stop during the, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Qing Dynasty.
I don't know.
I'm not really good with sounding out Q's, actually, I realized.
Really?
Q.
Q.
King.
Is it, how's it spelled?
Q-I-N-G.
You know what? It's not like I'm going to be able to help you.
It doesn't matter.
Y'all just let us know.
Y'all definitely let us know. But basically, they forbid it from them doing it ever again.
Wow.
Of course, though, when something is forbidden, that only sparks just a little bit more interest in the practice.
Tell me no, and I have to do it now.
The idea and ways of communicating with spirits carried on hidden away for hundreds of years until the spiritualist movement. Starting in the early 1840s, a movement dedicated to the afterlife took off. This was known as the spiritualist movement. It was based on the belief that the spirits of the dead exist and have the ability and the necessary means to communicate with the living. Spiritualists view the afterlife as a complex place where spirits are not stuck, but are actually evolving to the point where they are more advanced than humans. Wow. So, like, I feel like the afterlife is really misconcepted, or whatever the word I'm looking for is. Where people think that ghosts or spirits are like trapped there, and like that is the case a lot of the times. But this spiritualist movement, they thought of the afterlife or that holding place that keeps spirits here.
The in between
was more of like them being able to evolve into something that would help them ascend. I'm thinking
like
that's how,
maybe fixing your karma.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
There's so many different religions that look at, like Christianity is basically, well, I can't think of I'm going to say my version of Christianity, but like not Catholicism, where it's like you go straight from when you die, you go straight to heaven. And then isn't it it's in Catholicism or another form of it where it's like, that's why they don't cremate you, because you ascend whenever God or Jesus comes back, or God or whichever one comes back. I guess they're all the same. Comes back. They like, you have to have your earthly body still here, even though your soul is no longer. Yeah. So like heaven. Maybe that you would still be in the in-between at that point. I don't know much about Catholicism because I was raised Southern Baptist, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. It's also different.
And then many other ones are talking about reincarnation and all the things. So there's so many different versions of the afterlife in between situation.
For sure. They also believe, the spiritualists, they also believe that spirits in the afterlife were able to communicate about moral and ethical issues. And that's, like you said, karma. Right. That's what they were there for. Like, they were trying to fix their wrongs. And if they couldn't fix their wrongs, they were trying to give insight to others about potential wrongdoings or ethically
Spirit
wrong.
guides.
Yeah. You're getting to my point
there we
here.
go.
As well, they also gave insight on the nature of God. Members of this movement were huge on the idea of, Taylar already said it, spirit guides. Spirit guides are exactly what they sound like. It's a spirit that acts as a protector and a guide to a specific human being. Do you want to actually talk a little bit about your spirit guide right now?
Oh yeah, I don't think I've ever really even gone into detail about it.
Yeah, well, we don't have to. But...
Well, no, I want to. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
So, I think I might have touched on it once before in a creepy account episode, way before, and basically, I've always known of spirit guides, but more so like in the way that I was raised, it was more of like your angels, in that way, which spirit guides are your angels, and it just depends on how you perceive them, I guess. And whenever I met Susan, and you guys already know Susan, we love Susan, and she also does over the phone, all the things in Knoxville. If you ever want a reading, she's got a discount code with us, so definitely check her out. But the first time I met Susan, I didn't want necessarily a reading. I didn't want to connect with anybody that had passed, because everybody that's in my life that has passed, I know how they are, because I am such a spiritual person. So that's not more of what I wanted. I wanted more of like a reading on me. And that came for me in the form of a spirit guide. I got to meet my spirit guide, and I had done many like spirit guide led meditations in a way to like go and meet them. And I'd done many with Arletta. I think you and I did one with Arletta before. Did. And I knew who they were, and I knew like how they felt. It was very safe to me, but I could never see them, which is one of my biggest issues with my practices and what I do. And I'm not really good at seeing. And so when I met Susan, she was like, "Oh, you have your spirit guide here with you." And I was like, "Can you tell me what they look like?" And I knew it was a man. I immediately was like, "Can you tell me what he looks like?" And she goes, "Oh, so he's a man." I'm like, "Yes, I can tell it's very protective energy."
Right.
And not that women can't be, but that's just what it is for me. And she said, "Well, he showed himself to you when you were 5. And I was like, "Is he the man from the hallway?"
Son of a gun.
That son of a gun. So when I was little, I was about 5 years old, I was laying on my couch, and I had me and my dad and my mom had been watching a movie, and beside my living room there's a really long open hallway, and I was laying on the couch that was facing the TV, and from my right peripheral I could see the hallway, and my dad was laying on the couch he was laying down asleep on the couch.
As all dads do.
Yeah, they can never hang for a movie. That, you couldn't see into the hallway at that point unless you sat up. So we had been watching a movie, and I fell asleep. And my mom got up to go wash her face and get ready for bed, and let me and my dad lay there. And I opened my eyes because I heard something. And the TV was muted. The TV was off, in fact. And I opened my eyes, and my dad was laying over there. So I was thinking, oh, maybe he snored. But I, stayed up for a little bit. I was 5, so, whatever.
Right. And
I hear stomping, and I'm like, oh my God, my mom's walking. My mom's a stomper. I'm a stomper.
Yeah.
And
yes, you are.
I look, I see something moving to my right. So I look in my peripheral, and I'm looking down this hallway, and there's this Native American man, and he's dancing down the hallway. And he keeps saying "Hi, Taylar. I'm here for you, Taylar." And so I'm screaming bloody murder.
Who is that?
And my dad's waking up, and dad wakes up so panicked.
Right.
And mom comes sprinting into the room with suds all over her face from where she was washing it. And they're like, what's wrong? I'm like, there was a man dancing on the hallway. He was saying that he came for me. And they looked all around the house. And I was like, no, he was like a Native American man. And anyway, so he came for, and so I didn't tell the story to Susan. I was like, okay, I think I know who you're talking about. She goes, he is Native American, and he's wearing like a chief cap, which is what the man was wearing. Like it's not called a cap, but you know what I mean. Like the headpiece. And he basically came from the land where my house is. And that's because the Cherokee Native Americans, they had lived in the area that I was in, that I grew up in. There, that's where Red Clay is, which was the final meeting area of the Cherokee before the Trail of Tears. So very awful shit near where I live. Yeah. But basically, he had been buried up there or had done like ceremonial things up there, and so that was really interesting to me because I don't have any Native American in me. And I thought for the longest that I did because I felt so, I don't want to say I felt so connected to it, but I was always so intrigued by it, the history. And I don't know, it like made a lot of things in my life make sense. And she described him to me and I was like, that's him. That's literally him. And then I told her the story. Yeah. And then a few years later, because, that was in December of 2019 that I first met Susan. Yeah. I see Susan often. She said, she came in one day to my house. She goes, you have a new spirit guide with you. And I was like, okay, you can have more than one. Like, what's that about? She goes, you unlock. They show themselves to you at different points in your life, and they can change or they can grow the number of ones that you have. And the next one was like this awesome woman goddess situation.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And she was, I don't know.
Total babe.
Right, total babe. And she was like an ancestor of my spirit guide, or maybe someone that was very close with him. And basically she came into my life whenever I moved into like a new part of womanhood, and kind of took over. And so, yeah, those are my spirit guides.
And she is just guiding you along this babe path.
Yeah, this hot girl summer.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed.
Back to the story. This then new religion, the spiritualist movement, was huge. Like, I'm talking by 1897, there were more than 8 million followers in the United States and Europe.
Oh my God.
And the most interesting part is that of these 8 million, the majority of these believers, these followers, were actually from the upper class.
Wow.
Which is very interesting, I think.
Well, you wouldn't think it makes sense, but it kind of does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of does. They hosted camps, retreats, lectures, and tours, which were all guided by established mediums. Many of the established or prominent mediums, members of the movement, were women. Mm-hmm. Snaps.
We knew that.
And they were huge advocates of abolishing slavery as well as women's suffrage.
Of course.
I
wouldn't expect anything.
I would probably have been in the movement.
No, we would have been leading the movement.
Well, we would have been the prominent women in the movement.
We would have been hung and burned and been told that we were witches because of how crazy we'd be involved.
Yeah, probably. Spiritualism continued until the 1920s, when it began to lose its credibility after accusations of fraud mediums, and eventually evolved into 3 different paths. 1, syncretism, 2, spiritualist art, and 3, spiritualist churches. A big role in this movement, when it was flourishing, was creating a way to communicate with the dead by object. And they did so by the use of talking boards, which we know from back in the Song Dynasty. They were so popular throughout the members that in 1886, communicating with the dead through talking boards was in the front page of almost every newspaper in Northeastern America. Like, It took over. Like, it was a huge deal.
Meanwhile, they're like, we burned all the witches, so we're fucked.
Right. Yeah. Their talking board was much like today's Ouija board, which was patented by a man named Elijah Bond in 1890. Let's talk about him a little bit. Okay. Elijah Jefferson Bond was born on January 23rd, 1847 in Bel Air, Maryland. He was the 4th child of Judge William Bond and his wife, Charlotte. Upon graduating high school, Elijah went on to law school at the University of Maryland, graduating in 1872. In which he joined the Masons in 1873, aka
Freemasons.
The Freemasons, which plays a large role in this story and opened a practice in Baltimore. One of his best friends from college, who was also a Mason, named Harry Wells Rusk, who would later actually become the president of Kennard Novelty Company on Halloween in 1890.
Okay.
What an interesting coincidence.
That is,
Although Elijah was not a member of Kenner Novelty Company, Harry Rush hooked him up because of the idea Elijah proposed to patent a planchet to be sold with the boards, which he would call Ouija. But this was not at all Elijah's original idea, as his sister-in-law, Helen Peters, was a medium and used the talking board to communicate with spirits. At the time, talking boards, not only because of the massive spiritual awakening that was rocking the world, but specifically in the U.S. because of mediums, they were a hot topic.
they're popping.
After the Civil War, almost every family had lost a loved one. People were desperate to believe in the afterlife and a way to speak with those who existed there for guidance, closure, and reassurance. Mediumship, until this point, had been looked at as witchcraft, which we know.
Right.
The Salem witch trials.
Literally still to today.
But now it was all the craze. But if mediums just spoke through themselves, well, people weren't really believing it. Therefore, all mediums and psychics began practicing with the boards, creating portals, and using the energy to prove to those watching that their abilities were real. Elijah saw this as an amazing business opportunity when visiting his brother and sister-in-law, so he proposed the idea to Helen, asking her what she thought. So she asked the board, her talking board, the spirits, and her guides. And the board slowly spelled out O-U-I-J-A, Ouija. What does it mean? Helen asked as Elijah stood speechless beside her. Goodluck. Good luck.
Me trying to put those letters together in my head.
Ancient Egyptian. And that was it. Elijah had his $1 million idea. The planchet in the talking board patent was filed on May 28th, 1890, and issued on February 10th, 1891, becoming U.S. patent 446,054. However, they continued to market them as talking boards without using the word Ouija. An employee of Elijah named William Fuld took over the talking board production in 1901 when he began producing his own boards under the name Ouija Boards, since it had not been involved in the original patent of bonds, just more of a nickname. And because of this, Fuld's Ouija boards took over the market, pushing Bond's $1 million idea to the side. William Fuld had reinvented history and taken all the credit for himself. That's
Oh
fucked
my
up.
God.
By 1907, Elijah Bond, who was infuriated and a lawyer who couldn't even win a case over fuel, trademarked his own Nirvana talking boards on June 18th.
Holy shit. He couldn't even win the patent back
No.
or sue him.
That's
And
crazy.
he was a fucking lawyer.
Yeah, that's crazy. Nirvana talking boards look similar to the Ouija boards. The letters A through M in a curved line on top with N through Z below, and 1 through 0 in straight line. 1 through 10. Well, 1 through 0.
Yeah, it says 1 through
9,
0.
0.
Yeah.
1 through 0 in a straight line, and farewell written below. The four corners of the board were a little drawing, with the upper right-hand corner saying no and the upper left-hand corner saying yes. However, Bond assigned his trademark to Swastika Novelty Company in West Virginia.
Vomitus.
Therefore, the logo on top was a swastika.
Bullshittery.
In 1919, Elijah Bond had a massive stroke, causing full paralysis, and he died on April 14th, 1921. Just as Fuld's Ouija boards became top sellers across the world, he has held over 21 Ouija-related patents and copyrights.
Holy shit.
In 1920, an advertisement in the Metropolitan magazine featured promises of a talking board that, quote, prophesies, forewarns, and prefigures your destiny, with the image of a disembodied face floating behind a player's shoulder.
No.
Come play this game.
Yeah,
Figure out your destiny.
This man's gonna come float up behind you. Great.
Yeah, come play this game. Which is the image we now see on the bottom corners of the board. These boards were being sold for $1.50 each.
Oh my God.
However, William Fuld had made well over $1 million in net profit, aka after paying employees, supplies, marketing, labeling, packaging, etc. He was making pure cash off of these boards.
1 million in 1920 what?
1920. 1920.
1920. You're making 1 mil? How, I mean, what in the hell could
That's
that be
a
today?
lot of money on Ouija boards, on something that was so
Ouija board.
witchcrafty.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, don't do that. We burned everybody."
Right. On February 24th, my birthday, 1927, William Fuld passed away after falling off the roof of his talking board factory oh my God. Sorry, forgot about this when I wrote it. Was after he passed away after falling off the roof of his talking board factory to oversee the installation of a flagpole.
Damn.
That's
Damn.
some karma.
Yeah.
After his death, his children, Catherine and William Fuld, took over the company, and his youngest brother, Hubert, became the president of Fuld Incorporated. And they had a different, much more aggressive approach to selling their Ouija boards, making it seem like spirituality was for everyone and that it was something you needed in your home. Because of this, the Fuld family caught the attention of one of America's largest toy companies, the Parker Brothers, who bought the manufacturing rights to Ouija boards in 1966, keeping the original design, but adding a family-friendly makeover to the board that would be easier to sell to families since that was their market. They sold the boards in boxes that displayed a mysterious shoulder figure similar to Fuld's 1920s magazine advertisement, and this figure was waving a hand as if it were like casting a spell.
Ooh.
Advertising that the game had been made in Salem, Massachusetts.
What?
False lies.
Yeah, like, whoa. But, like, what a good marketing technique.
Right, yeah, that's genius. This podcast is actually being recorded in Salem.
Yeah.
This was a perfect timing as spiritualism in the occult was the most popular that it had ever been. In 1967, after just 1 year of Parker Brothers obtaining the rights to Ouija, it had outsold Monopoly.
Holy shit.
And it's just like crazy.
Monopoly.
Like Monopoly is like a game that you can literally like, it has point to it. Like you're playing it to have a point. Like Ouija, like there's no like winner. You know what I mean? Like it
maybe there was like
a game that they created, like how we create games like with random things.
Right. Like maybe it was a drinking game.
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't play it. This is when we start seeing the board in pop culture, such as the 1973 film The Exorcist. But even these terrifying movies and satanic panic of the 80s were not enough to keep these boards from flying off of the shelves. By this time, late 80s, early 90s, Parker Brothers began marketing the boards as a fun game that kids and teenagers hid under their beds to play together at sleepovers and hangouts.
Yeah.
They became a staple for sleepovers and birthday parties. Hasbro actually acquired the rights to the boards in 1991 when they absorbed Parker Brothers, which is when the board stopped its overwhelming advertisements and commercials geared towards kids. Thanks, Hasbro.
Like, probably a smart move, right?
Yeah. This was primarily due to the fact that churches were warning against the product. Ouija boards were a symbol of Satan to Christians. Kids used these to rebel for the thrill of the unknown. And when Hollywood picked them up, they played on the demonic side of the boards, using them to showcase possession and evil spirits. Occultists were divided on this. Some believed it was for dark magic and only experienced users should play with the boards, where others believed it was a tool for positive transformation and spiritual guidance. I mean, for years in the past, that is what it was for.
And you know what's so funny is for the most part, Christians think like Hollywood's against us, but really Hollywood was working in your favor.
Right.
It was making everybody scared as shit of using these boards.
Yeah, exactly. But how did this board that is made up of letters, numbers, illustrations, and words just become so evil? Well, we have our answer.
Oh, yeah, tell us, Morgan.
It's Hollywood.
Of
So
course.
simple. Hollywood. Until this point, they were used for literally illustration, then spiritualism, then a fun, thrilling game. Used by Hollywood as a joke, silly as seen in the 1951 episode of I Love Lucy, where she and Ethel host a seance using the board. Like, that's a comedy.
Right.
When Hollywood released The Exorcist, claiming it to be based on a true story, people were scared. Any movie that you see, this is based on a true story, it's freaking terrifying.
You're immediately like, okay.
Like, you're immediately like, all, like, your guard's up.
Right.
Like, you're like, oh shit, is something gonna come through the TV?
No, really.
Yeah, people were scared, and they watched as the board changed 12-year-old Reagan, possessing her with demonic spirits, and changed the fabric of pulp culture. Overnight, Ouija boards became a tool of the devil, which is why it continued to be used in scary movies and used to open the portal to hell. But they continued to sell as they were now spooky and exciting, turning Ouija boards from religious objects to now folklore and cautionary tales. So the real question is, do Ouija boards really work? Many studies have been conducted over the last 160 years on these spiritual boards, in which it has been proven that test subjects were moving the planchette involuntarily, meaning that our subconscious tricks us. It wants it to move, so our brain does it itself, not the spirits or demons. And planchettes are made to make the smallest muscle twitches effective in moving as a result. Planchettes are lightweight wooden pieces that are smooth with felt or slick plastic feet to aid in sliding across the board easily. Though scientists do not believe they can give us answers from the spiritual realm, they do believe that they are a great way of examining how the mind processes information on various levels. Researchers at the University of British Columbia's Visual Cognition Lab use the board to research and debate the levels of consciousness. So cool. Conscious, unconscious, subconscious, preconscious, and zombie mind.
Oh.
But that is really the extent. If you have listened to us long enough, you know that we absolutely do not fuck with Ouija boards.
We do not fuck with Ouija boards.
And why don't we? Because of the energy. If we have taught you anything in the 81 regular episodes we have released over the last year and a half, let this be one. When something is said to be dark or evil, we think of it in that way. Mm-hmm. It causes fear and dark thoughts. And that is low vibrational energy. Energy that you are directly sending towards these things, whatever it is. And where do dark and demonic spirits thrive?
In those dark places.
In the low vibrational energy. Wherever there is fear or low vibrations, creating a portal, lifting the veil. And that is where Ouija boards get their power. Not all of them, but it is just like any doll, any Dybbuk box, or the Dybbuk box, any haunted book, toy dinosaur, anything haunted, etc. And they become powerful. But let's get to the part that you really came for. The true stories of Ouija boards. These are all from Reddit. The first one I'm going to tell you guys it was posted by Reddit user Lil Pink Rodent 3 years ago on the Ouija board stories thread, and it's titled "The Old Woman Predicted My Aunt's Future."
Oh shit.
The user says, "I have never dabbled in anything besides homemade tarot cards, but my aunt did. She was known for always being very reckless and carefree. When she was about 15, she was left home alone and decided that she wanted to try a Ouija board. Whenever she's been asked why, she just tells us that she's always been curious and wanted to know if it really worked. She had to wait to be alone because my grandfather didn't allow for my aunt to dabble in practices that could go dark, with good reason. However, when they left her home alone, she decided to try it. They didn't have a Ouija board since my grandfather would never allow it, so instead, she crafted one out of a wood and a Sharpie.
I was like, what?
I know most of you are thinking that there's no way that would work, but there have been many cases where it has. If you provide spiritual or demonic entities with a medium you contact you with, it doesn't matter what it is. By touching the makeshift wooden planchet with the intent of summoning something, summoning something, my aunt granted whatever entity access to communicate with her.
Energy, what we were just talking about.
Right, and potentially attach itself to her. Unfortunately, this is what happened. The Ouija board ended up working, much to my aunt's initial delight, and she got in contact with the spirit of an old woman. The woman told her that she could predict the future. So, of course, my aunt asked her questions such as, what will I study in university? Where will I be in 20 years? And how will I die?
I will never ask anybody that.
Me neither. My aunt was skeptic of this woman's abilities, but knew that she shouldn't ask about her death date. Even if the woman couldn't, the date would still be in my aunt's mind and most likely plague her thoughts.
Yeah.
Anyways, the board answered English, Canada, and the same as your mother eventually will, breast cancer. My aunt at the time thought all of these were ludicrous, since she has always wanted to study the sciences in university, and at the time, my grandma hadn't gotten cancer yet. So, my aunt, being the ballsy and stupid kid she was, taunted the entity about her disbelief and asked the entity to prove it. So the entity told her that my grandfather would be home 1 hour earlier than planned and catch her with the board. She didn't believe the entity, of course, and continued to taunt it. This, in turn, angered it and resulted in becoming hostile towards my aunt. My aunt started experiencing cuts forming on her arms, and they continued to travel up.
Oh my fuck.
She screamed and threw the planchet right when my grandfather walked in and caught her in the act. Saying he was fuming was apparently an understatement. My grandfather, being very spiritual, closed the board properly by saying goodbye and immediately had a priest come bless the house. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, Dad.
Heck yeah. Afterwards, my aunt, of course, was in a lot of trouble. She tried to show my uncle the cuts received on her arms, only for them to have disappeared. The pain was still there, without any of the physical scarring. It's safe to say my aunt was petrified. The worst part, my aunt went to university to study English. After getting her bachelor's, the whole family immigrated to Canada as my grandfather's visa finally got approved. He was planning this for ages, but the visa took over a decade to be approved. Finally, my grandma has gotten breast cancer twice. And while she hasn't passed away yet, her time is approaching. My aunt is absolutely petrified and tells all of us the story to ensure we never dabble in any of these spiritual objects. I, myself, am quite the skeptic of all things spiritual and demonic in nature. I'm an atheist. extheist, but wonder if there is any plausibility to this because I can't deny that my aunt is always petrified at the mention of any of these objects. She is not the type to be frightened easily of anything, so it does make me question whether this is real. Have any of you had similar experiences with an entity that could predict the future or cause cuts on your arms that vanished? Or simply, any sort of story revolving around contacting spirits that you think might help me understand all of this more and maybe lower my skepticism? If so, please let me know. I love that question. So if you guys have ever had any similar experiences with an entity that could predict the future or cause cuts on your arms that vanish, let us know.
Yeah, or let them know. Little pink rodent.
Yeah, little pink rodent. The next story we have is posted by user Savage King FN 53827 3 years ago on the same thread, and it's titled Ouija Board Experience at School 2016, Texas.
Oh, shit.
So me, 11, and my brother and his friends that were a bit older than me told me to go inside of their teacher's classroom to do a Ouija board session. So I really didn't think much of it because I didn't know what it was and what it did. I put my hand on it and asked if it was a boy or a girl. It moved to G, so I assumed girl. I asked if it came to haunt one of us, and it spelled out my name. I was very shocked since I didn't tell my name at all. And then my nose suddenly started to bleed, though I had never had a nosebleed in my life. I ran to the bathroom and took care of it when I looked up into the mirror and I saw a small little girl behind me. I wanted to do a poker face, but I couldn't.
Call the police.
I swiftly looked behind me and saw no one was there. I was mostly frightened since I saw the girl and concluded that I was in fact being followed by a ghost of a girl or a man in a suit. I feel like I am being watched even when I am taking a shower with just me inside the bathroom. That was a good one.
Oh my God.
Short little good one.
Side note for everybody. I think I've said this once before. I don't know if it was on a Patreon or a regular, but one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten when cleansing my home is that your shower or faucets or sink or anything like that is just as much as an entrance into your home as your front door is.
Crazy.
So when you cleanse your house, the same way you would cleanse your front door, you cleanse your shower. Sorry.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The last one I have is from user not as vague 27042 3 years ago on the same thread. It says scary first experience. This past summer, me and my friend were on a spooky kick. You know, scary movies, sleepover games, midnight rituals, just a bunch of stuff to freak us out.
Us.
The ending of this kick was, of course, to play with a Ouija board. Not us. We bought it, then went over to her friend's house because she was house sitting and it was empty. We arrived, looked up rules, lit candles, and followed everything that the internet said to do. At first, we weren't getting anything. We were both wishful thinking, I think, and we're subconsciously moving it at first. I was going really slow and not making any sense. So we looked up what to do if nothing was working, and it said to take a break and come back to it. So that's what we did. Oh, no.
No.
When we came back, as soon as we did, the board started answering our questions. I am a former self-harmer and have had trigger warning, and have a suicidal past and things like that. The first thing that alarmed me was that it said there were 13 entities in the room with us. I asked how many were bad, and it said 12 out of the 13 were bad. The second thing was that it spelled out my last name. I kept asking what about it, and finally it answered that they liked me. I asked why, and it said, "You bleed," which I instantly just knew they were talking about the self-harm, which was terrifying. So we stopped, said goodbye and everything, and took another break. We came back, and I asked it if there was something that I should know, when it proceeded to tell me a very huge secret that my friend was keeping from me. She tried to stop, and when she did, it gave me even more details about what happened. We stopped then because neither of us could handle it anymore. We threw the board away in a McDonald's dumpster and tried not to think about it. About 2 weeks later, the board was back and in my friend's mom's back seat of her car. God. We have no idea how it got there. My friend knew nothing of how it got there, and her mom didn't even know we did it because we would get in huge trouble. After playing with the board for about 2 weeks after, I constantly felt watched and this deep, heavy feeling walking around in my house. I heard noises constantly. One time, my phone glitched and distorted the voice on the other end, then shut off. A bang went off by my face one night that sounded like someone punching the wall as hard as they could. And I hear noises in the cupboard and opening it to find cups and bowls flipped over completely or on their sides. All of this went away though, and I rarely feel things, although sometimes that heavy feeling comes back. And And then someone commented. Just going to read this comment, and then we're going to get to Taylar's part. It was commented by user Nicole H 1978, and they replied, "That loud noise you heard next to your face was probably a phenomenon called a rapport, which is the spirit world's version of a sonic boom. And it happens when a spirit pierces the veil between dimensions because of the difference in the frequency levels of different dimensions. I have used Ouija boards before, and sometimes whatever you contact can attach itself to you. Something attached itself to me, and I could see, sorry, I got a notification. I could see things, hear knocking and scratching on the walls of my house, and my bed would shake. I did a blessing and sealed my house and property, and that got rid of whatever had attached itself to me. I now know to set up spiritual protection before I use things like that. My sister and a friend used the Ouija board, and it predicted that my sister's friend would try to kill herself, which she did a few weeks later by drinking bleach. My mom used the Ouija board many years ago when she was pregnant and had asked if the baby would be a boy or a girl. The planchette kept spinning in a circle faster and faster and wouldn't give an answer. My mom lost that baby by miscarriage. I don't know exactly what we connect to through those boards, but they are very dark and they are very dangerous."
Oh my God.
And that is the Ouija board.
And that is why we do not use them.
That is why we do not use them. But I think Taylar has some true crime
I have
to talk
some
about
true crime
for
stuff.
you guys.
You ready?
Let's get it.
All right, guys. So you're going to be getting from me a few different true crime cases, but they are all the devil or Ouija boards made me do it murders.
Oh, shit.
So the first one is from the 1930 in Buffalo, New York. In early 1900s, French artist, renowned sculptor Henry Marchand and his wife painter, and this is a rough one. It's Clothalide. It's spelled Clothalide, but I know that's not how you pronounce it in French. So Clothalide.
There's that.
They had immigrated to the United States with their 5 children. The family settled in New York, where Henry began working as a diorama artist. I think that's how you pronounce it. At the New York State Museum. A diorama is a 19th century mobile theater device, and basically it's a scenic representation in which a partly translucent painting is seen from a distance through an opening that you look through, and it's similar to the way that Disney created the 3D cartoons.
Yeah.
Not like 3D how we think like IMAX, you know what I mean?
Right.
But like
Instead of like the paper cartoons.
yeah, like layering the background so there's dimension.
Yeah. Okay.
So in 1925, Henry and his sons, Paul and George, which were 2 of the oldest, and one of his daughters, Henrietta, were hired to construct dioramas by the Society of Natural Sciences in Buffalo, New York. Therefore, the entire family moved from New York City to Buffalo. Once there, these projects were to celebrate the lives and culture of the Native American tribes that had been in the area, which included the Seneca tribe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is how I grew up knowing how to pronounce it, but I could be very, very wrong. So Henry, his wife, and their kids would occasionally go stay on a nearby reservation in this like beautiful cottage. And they did this on many occasions in order to let Henry study the flora and fauna of the area and also get a closer look of the culture. Okay. So 53-year-old Henry became very close with one of the tribe members who had aided him in his work. And basically what this woman did was modeled for the majority of the paintings that he would put in this museum. And this woman was 36-year-old Leela Jemerson. And she was of the Seneca and Cayuga tribes in northern New York. So they became very close, and I'm talking so much so that Leela would actually stay at the family's home like time and time again. And during this time, the couple spent a ton, like that they were spending on this reservation. Clothalide would gather like wild mushrooms, and she would create sketches of the countryside, and just a way for her to keep her artistic skills because she was a painter and had put her entire career aside to raise the children and let Henry go forward in his art. Yeah. So it was just a way to keep her skills flowing and growing. So it was magical and earth connecting and spiritual for this artistic couple to be able to exist in such a beautiful area and being allowed by the people that own the reservation to come on, which wasn't very often that was allowed.
Not common.
Even still, it's not very much allowed. So on March 6, 1930, Henry II, so the youngest son of the family, returned home from school. When he walked in the front door, he saw his mother, Clothelide, sprawled out on the base of the stairs on the family's first floor landing, badly injured, but dead. Little Henry ran as fast as he could from the family's home to the museum, which was just down the road, to get his father and 2 older brothers, who then called for help. When authorities arrived at the home, along with Henry and their children, it was determined that Clothelide had slipped and fallen down the stairs. However, the medical examiner found bloody gashes, signs of a severe struggle, and major injuries to Clothelide's tiny French body, who was known for being like this tiny, tiny little petite lady.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that she had fought for her life in a vicious battle. And this was all confirmed by the smell coming from Clothelide's mouth. It was coming from a paper that had been forced down her throat, covered in chloroform. Clothelide had been murdered. Police began questioning those in the home and the neighbors explained that there had been a native woman at the home just hours before. Therefore, they questioned Henry about any native women that would be near their home or know the family, to which he directed them to Lila. Shockingly, Lila confessed to the murder of Clothelide and named her accomplice, 68-year-old Nancy Bowen, a Seneca tribal healer, both of which were then arrested. Nancy and Leela told investigators that they were searching for an explanation for the recent death of Nancy Bowen's husband, also a Seneca healer, Sassafras Charlie Bowen. Using the Ouija board to communicate with his spirit, and once he came forward, they asked him the question, "What happened? Why did you die? Did someone kill you?" Slowly, the planchette began moving. THEYLLEDME. They killed me. Who? The women asked. Again, the planchette began sliding from letter to letter. CLOTHILDE 576 RILEYST. Clothelide, 576 Riley Street, which was her address.
Oh my God.
The women believed that Clothelide was a witch. Therefore, Leela began creating a relationship between her and Clothelide, coming around often, staying at the house, becoming a trusted friend to see if she was truly a witch. During this time, Nancy began receiving letters from a woman named Miss Dooley, explaining that she knew for a fact that Clothelide was a witch, and she had hexed Bowen's husband out of jealousy. Her witchcraft did not work, so she decided to kill him herself, Miss Dooley wrote. Therefore, Nancy decided that she would be next. Clothelide had to die. Leela was to go to the museum and keep Henry from returning home, which was easy to do since the two had started having an affair.
Oh, shit.
Henry later said that he had so many affairs that he had lost count, as it was easier for his models to be naked for the paintings around him, and he would paint them with a more intimate connection, which would make the painting better.
Okay.
I'm
sure.
Yeah, all right. Leela distracted Henry while Nancy went to the family's home, knocked on the door, and Clothelide answered. She invited Nancy in because she explained that she was a friend of Leela's. Once in the home, the door was closed, and Nancy, who did not speak great English, began accusing Clothelide of being a witch and killing her husband. Clothelide, confused and trying to reason with Nancy, but did not realize what danger she was truly in, was until Nancy pulled out a hammer and began beating Clothelide to death. Once she was no longer moving, Nancy forced a chloroform-soaked... Did I say chlorophyll earlier? It's chloroform, if I said that.
I thought you said chloroform.
Chloroform-soaked piece of paper down her throat and left the home. The trial began, in which Henry explained that his wife knew of all of his affairs and was okay with them, as they were both artists, and they had made this understanding for a free love connection. It's a creative lifestyle, and it was a, quote, professional necessity. I don't know about that one.
Right.
I don't know about that one.
Not too sure.
But upon hearing this, Leela Jemerson collapsed, and there was a mistrial that had to be declared because she was in such bad condition. It turns out Leela had a lung condition and had been admitted to the hospital, which upon being admitted, she pled guilty to second-degree murder. However, it was obviously quickly retracted because she was not in her right mind. Like, she couldn't breathe. So who can think in the right mind when you can't breathe?
Yeah.
And you're having a panic attack because the man you love just told you that you're one of a bill, you know? Yeah, not cool. So by the time the second trial commenced, both the women had been held without bond. So they had been imprisoned or jailed this entire time. But Henry was already remarried.
Oh, was he? To a model?
No, it's worse. To his wife's 18-year-old niece. And they were living in Albany. Leela denied any involvement in the murder other than just having an affair with Henry, in which he had asked her and many of his other mistresses if they would help to, quote, get rid of his wife because he was, quote, tired of her.
Oh, shit.
Anthropologist Arthur C. Parker testified that the instruments used to kill Clothelide were used accordingly to their beliefs, to the women's beliefs. And the tools were used to expel evil spirits.
Oh.
So just over a year had passed since Clothelide's murder when the second trial officially ended, in which Leela Jemerson was found innocent. And Nancy had been found guilty. However, she was only given a sentence of the time she had already served. Therefore, both of the women were freed.
No way.
I mean, but you have to think, like, when I was reading this, I was like, what the fuck? You have to think, like, they thought she was a witch, so they were doing what they were taught to do.
Believe, yeah.
In their religion. I mean, I don't think it's fair. I don't think anybody should die, but like I understand, and I do think that these women, another part of me when I was reading this, I was like, they just turned it on natives.
Yeah.
He did it. They turned it on the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And just to get out. So I don't know how much I truly believe.
That, like,
But she admitted to it. Nancy did. But again, these are from court documents and newspaper articles that I'm reading from this time. So there's really no telling what really happened.
We'll never know, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Henry actually died at the age of 73 in 1951. And Leela Jemerson, despite her lung condition, lived until 1972 and married another painter and lived happily ever after. Clothelide's daughter, Henrietta, said that her mother was a, quote, true artist who never had the chance when her mother's paintings were exhibited in a memorial tribute.
Aww.
All right, on to the next story. 1933, we're in St. John's, Arizona. Dorothea and Ernest Turley lived with their two children, David and Maddie, on a ranch near St. John's, Arizona. Dorothea had some sort of an American sweetheart because she had won the title of American Venus in 1917.
Oh, shit.
So men were obsessed with her, and this included Ernest, who would later end up being her husband. But he was serving in the U.S. Navy at the time, and he just swept Dorothea off of her feet with all of his charm and knowledge. The two quickly eloped and lived in Boston, where they had their first daughter, Maddie, in 1918. And then the next year, the couple welcomed their son, David. It was the perfect family of four. In 1921, the family moved to California, settling in Coronado. And the next decade, the family was pretty quiet. Dorothea kind of fell off from her fame, and the adoration of all the people in, America just kind of fell to the side because Ernest's Navy salary was just not paying for the things she needed to stay in the spotlight. And that has to cause some sort of a relationship strain in any way, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Right. Because she's like thinking, I'm royalty.
Yeah.
And you can't fund me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's my mindset.
It's mine too. I hate that.
I hate that for
I'm
us.
also royalty.
We're royalty.
But guys, we work. There's a difference. She didn't work. I don't guess you really had the choice if it's in the 1930s. Anyways.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah. So, not to mention, to add to the strain, Ernest's health was really declining, and it was as a result of war. He had basically a really hard time breathing due to the gases that he was exposed to during battles, and because of this, the family decided to move to Arizona, where it was drier and higher up, so it would be easier for him to breathe. Officially moving there in August of 1933 and settling in a cabin high in the White Mountains. Once there, Dorothea began hosting seances with her Ouija board.
Oh, Dorothea.
Ernest always wrote her off, just being like, you're fucking crazy talking to your board.
You're royalty, though, so you can do whatever.
Whatever. If that makes you happy, go ahead.
Yeah.
However, 15-year-old Maddie loved being with her mom when she would perform her dark cabin seances and speak to the spirits through the board. On the night of November 17th, 1933, a skunk had gotten under the family's cabin and was duking it the fuck out with the family's pet cat.
Oh, no.
Causing the skunk to, like, continually spray its awful, like, smelling spray.
Oh, my gosh.
And
that's Nona.
It's literally Nona. It's literally Nona. And then the cat...
If Gizzy was a cat, that would be... Or if Gizzy was a skunk, not a cat, that would be
Nona.
Gizzy.
And not to mention, like, the cat... They couldn't get the cat to come out, like, Nona. And so the cat's just staying down there and like... Wah. You know how cats get. They're fucking crazy. They make the scariest sound. So no one got any sleep that night because A, it smelled like shit. And B, it was the loudest, like, cat fight you've ever heard. So the next morning, Dorothea and David were running into town to get groceries and to celebrate David's birthday at dinner with a cake and all the things. He got to pick out whatever he wanted. And it's November 18th at this point, and the family, like I said, got no sleep. They smell like shit. It's bad. So Ernest is like, I'm sitting my fucking ass outside all day long until I see this skunk come forward. Yeah. And he's going to pop it. So he's sitting there with a shotgun, leaning up against a tree, just looking at the crawl space opening, just waiting. The
skunk gotta go.
Yeah, he's like, this has been enough, especially if it's your son's birthday,
Yeah.
So Maddie decided to stay back with her dad while her brother and mom ran to the store. And so she was like, I'm going to kill this skunk with dad. And the kids knew how to use guns because they hunted a lot.
Yeah.
And they were well trained because, again, their dad was still is in the Navy. And so he really taught them a lot about, like, gun safety and how to use them properly. So they all had their own guns. And again, 1930, something in the mountains, whatever.
Right.
So, they enjoyed hunting together, like I said, and this was something they did often. Like Dorothea and everybody would load up and go hunting. But after a while,
after skunk.
Yeah. But after a while, Ernest kind of gave up and decided he was just going to go get a bucket and corral their new cow and milk it. So Maddie followed him, holding her shotgun, and they milked the cow and started heading back to the house. Ernest was carrying the milk-filled bucket, and 15-year-old Maddie was carrying her shotgun, walking behind him. As they headed through the gate, 2 shots rang out. Ernest fell to the ground, and he had been hit in the hip with 2 bullets. Looking back to check on his daughter immediately. Maddie was fine, but she was on her knees with a smoking shotgun laying beside her. Maddie began screaming and crying, Daddy, are you hurt? Like, Daddy, what did I do? Ernest was bleeding from these bullet wounds, and he's like, go get help. What the fuck?
Why did you shoot me?
Right. So Maddie, frantic, ran to the neighbors, who then called a doctor. And at this point, when Dorothea and David returned home, there were like so many people in the house, like all the neighbors, the doctor.
And the smell of the skunk.
Yeah. And like the skunk is, I'd be so embarrassed. Like, you know what? Can we treat him outside the house?
Can we actually do it with the cows?
Yeah. Can we do this on the front porch? Anyway, so they're treating them, and all the neighbors are over, and they're comforting Maddie, like helping Ernest heal from this. And Ernest just told Maddie, like, look, this is a great lesson for you. You've got to be more careful. Like, we're very thankful that I'm not more hurt than I am. It was just his hip. But he wasn't angry because it was obviously an accident. She tripped, right?
Wrong.
So one neighbor, Kent Pierce, who was a rancher, offered to stay with the family and aid Dorothea as she tended to her husband. So he stayed the entire night and held the lantern for her and helped them out.
Can't imagine time like that.
No, I'd be like, I can hold my own fucking lantern, by the way. It's fine. So once the news spread, police officers, along with the doctor, returned the next day to check on Ernest and make sure he was healing properly. And they needed to just like file the report, you know?
Yeah.
So upon re-examining the now dried wounds, the doctor showed officers that the bullets had entered Ernest's back straight on. Not from below, meaning that the gun had been aimed and fired, not dropped and fired. so whoever fired it was standing at the time. Once officers learned this, they're like, okay, well, let's go talk to Maddie and just see what she has to say about this. And not long after, she admitted that she had shot her father on purpose. But why? 15-year-old Maddie explained to officers that she was simply obeying the commands of her mother's Ouija board. She went on to explain that she had raised and aimed her gun twice before, but didn't have the courage to pull the trigger, until she remembered how important it was for her mother to marry and be happy with her new handsome cowboy, aka Kent Pierce, the neighbor. Officers, confused, asked 15-year-old Maddie to elaborate because they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? A board told you to do this. And Maddie explained that a few nights before, she and her mother were doing their regular seance when both Dorothea and Maddie had their fingers on the planchette. The board began talking to them.
So it's planchette, and I called it planchette the entire time.
Well, I say it differently. I thought you were saying it correctly. Planchette?
Sorry, guys. Planchette. That's what I've been calling it.
Oh, I think you were saying planchette. Well, I don't know. I mean, I could be saying it wrong. Who fucking knows?
It's probably planchette.
So slowly the planchette began to move. DADDYMUSTDIE.
Daddy must die.
Daddy must die. Which should be the name of a podcast. Don't steal that trademark. Trademark. Don't fucking steal that. So Maddie, obviously shaken by this message, asked her mother, like, okay, Mom, do we really have to do what the board says? To which Dorothea responded, there is no escaping its command. And then the board began to move again. MOMMY. No. MOMMYWILLBEHAPPY WITHTHECOWBOY.
Mommy will be happy with the cowboy.
Thank God you got it, because holy hell. And I typed below this in my notes, damn, this board can fucking talk, bitch. I mean,
yeah.
Could you imagine? I'd be like, I can't even keep up.
I'd be like, can I get my notepad?
Yeah, hold on a second. I gotta take my fingers off. I gotta write this shit down.
Yeah.
And officers went to Dorothea, obviously, in earnest about this. And they're like, listen, your daughter just said that your board was the one who said that she had to kill her dad. And Ernest, fucking shocked and horrified, was like, I'm sorry, what? It wasn't an accident? And Dorothea, enraged, begins accusing the officers of manipulation, causing a scene, and ordering them out of their home. But then Maddie came around the corner and said, Mom, why don't you remember what the board told us the other night? That you were going to be happier with the cowboy. We had to kill Daddy. You said I couldn't escape the command of it. So the officers are like, oh my fuck. So Maddie was then taken to juvenile court, where she was sentenced to a reform school until the age of 21. Meanwhile, Ernest was deteriorating quickly. Therefore, the U.S. Marine Corps plane flew from... Did I say that right? Plane flew from San Diego to Arizona, where it was going to take him back to California at this naval base hospital to take better care of him. However, it was too late. A few days later, Ernest died on December 26, making this no longer an accidental shooting, but a fucking murder. Upon Ernest's death, Dorothea was arrested and placed in jail with no bond, charged with the intent to murder. Maddie pled guilty to shooting her father and was sentenced to 6 years at the Arizona State School for Girls. Dorothea testified that she could have not controlled the board, saying that she didn't even believe in its powers, and she believed that it was either accidental or her daughter acting out of anger. However, she was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. But she only served 2 years before the conviction was overturned because she was granted a second trial where she was found innocent because the first trial had refused to allow evidence that Maddie was lying into the entire court because they were like, that's her entire defense. Right. That was Dorothea's entire defense, was that Maddie was lying, that her daughter was lying and did this out of an act of anger. So she's throwing her fucking daughter underneath the bus right now, underneath the horse and carriage, or whatever the fuck they had then. So yeah, Maddie refused to communicate with her mother or attend any of the visits with her because she knew that the truth was Dorothea was in love with the cattle rancher neighbor Kent and had been obsessed with him for a long time, talking with Maddie about him for the longest. And he had been the same one that stayed to carry the lantern that night. Like, wow, I need you to carry this fucking lantern for me.
you were fucking.
Right. We're fucking. So Dorothea actually ended up trying to sue the school for turning her daughter against her. However, the outcome has never been released, or maybe it never went through. Again, this is from like 1933.
Right. Probably never went through.
Yeah. And Maddie never spoke to her mother again.
Good.
Yep. So on to the next one. In 1987, Orlando, Florida. So in July of 1987, sources differ on this date, but I'm pretty sure it's some say 1983, but the majority of the ones I found said 1987.
In the 1980s.
Yeah, in the 1980s. 25-year-old Anthony Hall, 16-year-old Bunny Dixon, 17-year-old Elizabeth Town, and 23-year-old Dan Bowen, another Bowen, which I find so interesting, right? Decided that they wanted to move from Orlando, Florida to Virginia, where they were going to join a carnival. Carnies. So this was actually at the instruction of Bunny's Ouija board.
Weird.
Already off to a bad start, right?
Bad start. Carnivals are odd.
So Anthony and Dan had been cellmates while in state prison that they had just been let out on parole of. And Elizabeth and Bunny had been friends in a juvenile detention center and knew of Anthony because he was either Elizabeth's older brother or Bunny's boyfriend, or Dan was dating Elizabeth and that's how they all met. But all the sources differ. But I'm pretty positive that Elizabeth and Anthony were brother and sister. And maybe that's what's the connection.
Okay.
And then maybe Bunny and Anthony like started fucking.
Okay.
Maybe like that. Okay.
All right, I'm with you.
Okay. So either way, they have all these big plans that they're going to move, but they have no car and they have no fucking money. So how are they going to make that happen? Well, the four decided that they were going to stop a car on the road, appearing to be hitchhikers. And once someone stopped to pick them up, they were going to rob them and steal their car because they were carrying knives and stolen guns with them as well. That they can make this happen, and
right.
They did that, but went a little off script. So the girls were on a street in Orlando and the men were kind of far behind them, so they couldn't be seen. So it was more of like, oh, you can pick up two women. So the plan was the women would get someone to pull over, which would be easier if it was just two women instead of men. And once the car pulled over, the men were going to come up from behind, demand money at gunpoint, and then pull the person out of their car and flee with the vehicle. So
cool.
Finally, a car stops on July 20th, and driving was 25-year-old. I am really not going to do a good job at pronouncing this, but it's a Vietnamese name. It's Ngoc Van Dang. So he pulled over and offered the women a ride, and as soon as they opened the door, the men came up from behind and robbed him at gunpoint. But then they tied him up and placed him in the trunk of his own car. The four quickly loaded into the car and drove off to a wooded area off of Interstate 95, where they then tied Dang up, making sure that he was secure, and pulled him out of the car into this wooded area. Once he was securely tied, Bunny, a Satanist, took a butterfly knife, ripped Dang's shirt down the center, and carved a large upside-down cross on his chest before instructing the men to shoot Dang, taking turns in the head, neck, and torso.
What?
7 times. Bunny said that Dang was a satanic sacrifice, thanking the board for providing them by giving it a soul in return.
I'm appalled.
Yeah. Dan and Elizabeth obviously were like, we did not sign up for murder. One, Dan's on fucking parole, and Elizabeth just got out of a juvenile detention center. So they're like, we didn't sign up for this. And this caused like a big argument because they were like, we just wanted the car, the money, and to fucking leave Florida and join a carnival.
Wasn't part of the plan.
We didn't want to kill anybody. So they make it up to Weldon, North Carolina by the next day, July 21st, with a car. And the arguments at this point became too much to handle. They were panicking. Everybody was like, Anthony and Bunny were like on some sort of like fucking high from this murder. And Dan and Elizabeth were shitting themselves. Like, we're going to get put back in prison.
Yeah.
So they get out of a car at like a truck stop or something, and Bunny and Anthony jump in the fucking car and leave them behind. Just drive off. So out of anger, Dan and Elizabeth went to police, and they told them everything that had happened, that they had been saying we had been held at gunpoint and forced to murder this man, and we had been cursed by a Satanist to do so.
Whoa.
So police in North Carolina immediately are calling Orlando officials, and they're like, listen, they're saying that there's this body at this place. You guys need to go see if it's there. And sure enough, in Volusia County, they found Dang's body.
Volusia County.
Volusia? Yeah. Why?
That's where my grandma lives.
In like Daytona area?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's where it was.
Yep.
And they found his body in the woods there.
Hey, Grandma.
Hey, Grandma. How's your skylight frame? All 4 were arrested and then separately tried. Anthony Hall was convicted of first-degree murder, and the others were convicted as well, but I could not find fucking anywhere what they were convicted of. It was only about Anthony Hall.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was weird. So the next one we have, and I believe this one's my last one, is from 1995 in Walworth, southeast London. 19-year-old Michael David McCallum lived in a flat in Walworth, London. Sorry for all of my people in the UK right now. They're like, it is literally not that. So fucking sorry.
Immediately no, Taylar.
Immediately no. So he was known to dabble in Satanism and was pretty much an outcast his entire life. And McCallum had turned his entire flat into a shrine to Satan, with a black magic altar in his bedroom surrounded by candles, posters of Satan, torture, and human sacrifice, lyrics of heavy metal songs written on the floors, walls, and furniture.
That's like some Criminal Minds shit.
Yeah.
Profiling right there.
Yeah. And Devil Man Killer 666 written in a I can never say this. Pinnacle? That's the star. That's
Pentagram?
like this. No, is it pentagram? Pinnacle? I don't know. Whatever. You guys know what we're talking about. We literally have a paranormal podcast. What is it called?
Pinnacle Whip Vodka?
Yeah. Is that what it
is?
On the TV with books and magazines on Charles Manson stacked in every corner, as Manson was his idol.
Oh, shit. Red flag.
So on December 2nd, 1995, 15-year-old Stephen Curran and Michael Earridge were walking on the street when they ran into McCallum and his friend, who isn't named in any documents, and it says for legal reasons.
Oh, maybe a big deal?
Maybe a big deal. And listen as I'm going through this because it's whack. No, this is not my last one. This is my second to last one. Okay. This is fucking whack, right? So, they like, apparently the friend that was with him knew of these kids, these 15-year-old boys, and they were kind of acquainted. They weren't friends, but they got to talking. All right. Okay. And so after a little bit, McCallum invited Stephen and Michael up to his flat to watch movies. And they were like, hell yeah, we get to hang out with the older guys? Fucking hell yeah. So the 4 men made their way up to the flat, and once in the apartment, the 15-year-olds were in shock, looking around and fucking terrified at the decorations, writings, and shrines that were surrounded by candles. And McCallum was like, listen, how about I show you how a Ouija board works? And Michael was like, I don't want to put my finger on this, like I know better. But he was then threatened that he would get his fingers chopped off if he didn't. So he put his fucking fingers on the planchette.
Oh my God.
So in a circle, the 4 young men sat while McCallum chanted, asking for Satan to come forward. And then he asked, if you are Satan, what is it that you want me to do? Slowly the planchette moved. Kill. Kill. If you didn't get that.
Kill.
Kill. The teens were fucking freaked, obviously. And they're like standing up and they're like, hey, we want to leave. We're leaving. And McCallum says, you're not going anywhere until I have my master's will done.
I don't like this guy.
I don't like him.
Bad vibes. This guy's giving me bad vibes. Like, he's going to kill someone.
Right? So then McCallum gets up and locks all of the deadbolts that he had installed on his door with a key from the inside.
Oh, shit.
Michael was frantic, and McCallum then hits him over the head, knocking him to the ground. McCallum then pulls a knife on the teens and forces them into the bedroom and forces Michael onto the altar. Once on the altar, Stephen was threatened to sit down or he would be next, as McCallum strangled Michael with his bare hands until he fell unconscious. And once he did, he began stabbing him over and over and over again. And he didn't stop until his unnamed friend, who we later learned was actually his satanic apprentice, whispered, "You can stop now. You can calm. He is dead." Stephen was forced to then hold the knife that had just killed his best friend and then to place his fingerprints deliberately on it, smearing his own fingers with blood of his best friend. I just fucking wouldn't. I'd be like, go ahead and kill me. I'm not.
Yeah, I'd be like, I can't.
And then he was freed, but he was threatened with his soul if he were to ever tell. Of course, Stephen's like, fuck that.
Yeah.
So he ran as fast as he could to Michael's house, his best friend who he just witnessed getting murdered, and told Michael's father everything that just happened. Frantically, they called the police. McCollum was arrested that night, and when he opened the door for police, he grinned and said, "I'm guilty."
No.
Telling police that he was still buzzing from the high of his sacrifice. He told police that he drank 2 bottles of Thunderbird wine before attacking Michael, and it was because of the voices in his head or from the board that told him time and time again to kill over and over again. And it was clear when the board spelled out the instructions. Michael had to die. McCollum smiled during every single court appearance, gaining a high reliving what he had done to the 15-year-old. McCollum was then sentenced to life in prison.
Holy shit. And we know nothing about the friend?
We know nothing about the friend. I dug so hard. I could probably dig a little bit more.
I wonder.
I could probably dig a little bit more if I really had all the newspaper articles. Yeah. But hey, people in London, let us know. All right, last one. So this one's from 2001 in Minco, Oklahoma, which apparently is like not too far away from Oklahoma City. So on the night of February 11th, 2001, police were called to the scene of a crash on I-44 northbound towards Tulsa. It was a single car accident at a high speed, and the car had been deliberately crashed into a road sign. Driving the car was 53-year-old Carol Sue Elvaker. Her daughter was in the car as well, 34-year-old Tammy Roach, and Tammy's 2 daughters who were 15 and 10 at the time. The 4 women were trying to get out of the car with severe injuries when Carol Sue attempted to push her 15-year-old granddaughter into oncoming traffic when police showed up, making the struggle between the two end. So Carol had actually 2 broken ankles, but despite this, she took off running on foot, stripping her clothes off, jumping the median barrier, good God, I don't know why I couldn't say that, and running into the woods. Police were obviously able to trace her down because she had 2 fucking broken ankles, and she was like hiding in like this like rocky area, like squatted down like butt ass naked. And they're like, okay, come on, babe. So they then take her to be treated at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. And it was the reason why she had to stop, she later explained, was because finally the pain had set in. I mean, yeah, you're running on 2 broken ankles.
Right.
So Tammy and her daughters were picked up by first responders still at the scene, and they were fucking frantic, screaming that Carol had killed Tammy's husband, 34-year-old Brian, at their home. Tammy and her daughters were taken to the hospital for treatment while officers went back to the home where they found 34-year-old Brian Roach dead in his bed with 1 stab wound to the heart. And in the floor of the living room, they found a Ouija board. Tammy Roach was questioned by authorities where she told them the entire story. That night, Carol herself and her daughters were playing with Carol's Ouija board in having a seance when the board told Carol that Brian had been possessed by an evil spirit and needed to die. And just a forewarning, if you look this up, it literally shows you the demon and says the name, so don't. Because I literally was having a panic attack the entire day.
Oh my God.
So don't look it up. Was possessed by this demon and needed to die. So she then took a knife from the kitchen block and went into Brian's back room where he was sleeping, stabbing him once directly in the heart. Brian begged his wife to help him, but the women just stood there as he bled to death before Tammy hid the knife in the home at the direction of her mother and was forced into her own car because Carol said that Tammy's daughters were possessed too. Tammy and Carol fought as Carol drove as fast as she fucking could, looking for the perfect place to crash the car and kill all 4 of them. This was huge big news, not only because of how crazy, but because Brian Roach had actually been elected as mayor of Minco in 1986 until 1991, and he had been elected at the age of 19. So he was like well known and well loved in this area.
Yeah.
This is like a higher up family, you know? And to add to this, there had been no sign of mental illness or odd behavior that Carol presented until that night. So they think she was really fucking possessed by this board.
Oh my God.
Carol was arrested and convicted of first-degree murder, and Tammy was arrested and convicted of being accessory to crime for hiding the weapon. But I think she only served a year. So that's it for my cases, but there are many other cases like this.
Love that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And all of the other ones are just as fucking crazy and wild, and they are so worth the read. But things like this are why we urge you all to be wary of Ouija boards, spirits, and portals, and why we have never and will never play with a board.
No.
So that is Ouija boards for you guys.
Terrifying. We want your Ouija board stories. I know you guys.
I know you guys have some.
You guys have them.